a lifelong public school teacher. I teach here in Columbus, actually. I teach at a place called the Welcome Center. It's actually called Columbus Global Academy. It's a welcome center for refugees, for people who have come here under very difficult circumstances, who have highly interrupted education. Yeah, we're under attack right now, so on a daily basis, I don't like to get too into it, otherwise I get emotional. But my interest is the theology of service to the other. And I've been recently really inspired by Rick Boothby's work, especially seeing in the other their unknowability, the presence of the real in the other. I tend to call it irreducible ambiguity of the other. And in service, this irreducible ambiguity of the other emerges. And I think anybody interested in serving somebody else has got to develop a sort of strange love, excessive jouissance around the idea of what cannot be known about the other, and the object, the counter object that's differentiated out of their unknowability. So I take Jacques Lacan's idea, register of the real, and its negative interaction with the symbolic and the imaginary, the non-relation between all three, and compare it to Jean-Luc Marignon's saturated phenomenon, which he also refers to as counter-experience. In counter-experience, there is a too muchness. He calls it too much givenness. That's a saturation of the intention, to the point where it's the excess of the intention is the unintentional aspect of I'm talking about the phenomenological intention here, but I'm talking about it in both meanings, which I think should always be kept whenever you do talk about the phenomenological intention, as your intention and as the aboutness that's before you. And so in Marignon's counter-experience, you also get a counter-object, which is an excess. In Lacan's, you get a pure lack or an absence of symbolization. However, Lacan says, in terms of this excess, this weird relationship between lack and excess, he says that, he's talking here about anxiety, but he says anxiety is not without its object. And so the assumption within phenomenology for a long time is anxiety is without an object. But in Lacanian psychoanalysis, there is an object and it's present. And that's very resonant with classical notions of phenomenology, even though it's considered a counter-object, if you will, and that's the object of irreducible ambiguity. So I'll get more into that. But I just want to start with a quote. Lifelong inspiration for me has been Dorothy Day. She says, the gospel takes away our right forever to discriminate between the deserving and the undeserving poor. And I've always been struck by the lack of discrimination that you can have in an act of service to another. There is no discerning, deserving, undeserving, whatever. It's a thing that people enter service get caught up in, ironically. It's part of this irreducible ambiguity of serving the other. You don't know what you're doing, which relates to me one of my favorite Lacan quotes of all time: "Love is giving what you don't have to someone who doesn't want it." And again, it's ambiguous what you're giving and what's being received, yet you're giving, and what you're giving, I think, and receiving is irreducible ambiguity. And then I'll just, because we need a little Marion in here to start us off. To love requires loving without being able to or willing to wait any longer to be able to love perfectly, definitively, or forever. Loving demands that the first time already coincides with the last time. So you have to give up any kind of perfection. You have to give up any definitiveness to what you're doing, even knowing what you're doing half the time. And so that's because you're entering into this irreducible ambiguity of service, which for me follows the exact structure of any. My training is in religions, history of religions. The descent into the dark night. It's always an extremely disorienting experience, and so you're giving up a lot of your concepts about how this should go or how this should work. As you enter into the real of the other. For Lacan, the object of the real, or the counter object of the real, is developed from the irreducible ambiguity of the real's absolute resistance to symbolization. So that resistance to symbolization forms the counter object in the symbolic as a warping of the symbolic. So it's a positivized lack. It's the presence of absence, however you want to put that. Marion puts it as visible invisibility, and I always thought when I was listening to Marion that of Milton's version of Satan as darkness visible. What's essential here for Marion and for Lacan, and for Milton, is that the visibility of what is invisible, what Marion calls visible invisibility, is visible as visible as invisible. You don't reduce any of the ambiguity of the invisibility by conceptualizing invisibility, because it's made visible through symbolic failure. It's made visible through the lack of symbolization, and this is sort of the relation between Marion and Lacan is this relation between lack and excess that this conference is about. And so a lack of symbolization is an excess of what cannot be symbolized. So the way Marion puts it in phenomenological terms is that you have the intention, again, which is how you see the world according to your intentions, and then you have what is counter to that intention, what is unintended in your intention. So what makes your intention fail, Heidegger's brokenness or something like this. And so, this is the non-relation between the symbolic and the real and the imaginary. So the irreducible ambiguity is the counter object of lack of representation, which is differentiated into an object from what resists objectification. Marion defines saturated phenomenon as more than enough intuition for the intention. The more than enough intuition is an affect that cannot be reduced, so he calls it the overproximal affects of saturated phenomenon. The affects are overproximal, they're closing in on you because they're too much, and they cannot be symbolized. They're what cause symbolization to fit. But you can see it's like a very active, positive force. It's not, so that lack can become this smack right in your face you feel it as a positive resistance. Should probably get, he also calls these immeasurable or disorderly phenomenon. Should probably get into an example since I'm running out of time. So the Lacanian phrase, the anxiety is not without an object, refers to a dissatisfaction that's built into indeterminability. So for Marion, the undeterminable hermeneutics of saturated phenomenon have it built just like for Lacan. So this for Lacan, maybe I should separate this out. The object cause of anxiety causes the analysand to speak, to try to determine what's not determined. So it contains within it the motivation, the desire. Well, that's why it's called object cause of desire, because the failure to represent is what causes the desire to represent. And so, we have the intention plus what's unintended. And so for Marion, that's a dissatisfaction of what's unintended in the intention that causes one, for him, like Rick Boothby, is the object cause of religion. So Marion's, the beginning of theology is this dissatisfaction of undeterminable hermeneutics that is an excess rather than a lack. Or both, I guess that's the argument of this idea. But that dissatisfaction that's in undeterminable hermeneutics is because of care, Heideggerian care. And Marion took Heidegger's, I guess, order of events and kind of switched them. He put care before everything, before being. So that care is, for Marion, unconditional love, establishes being. So Marion, probably one of his most famous, well-known books is God Without Being. The idea there is that, one way to put it, is that God's love preceded God. So any phenomenological presentation of the sacred was always preceded by love. And so care is the first thing, love, care, desire. So that any thing that goes wrong with our desire, with our love, like perversion, anything, any misstep it takes, is ultimately because of love, because we care, because we're interested in our existence. And so that weirdly, even when that goes wrong, that's still a part of that. But I really should go up. So let me, Husserl's reductionalist to consciousness, Heidegger's reductionalist to design, but Marion's reduction is to the ontology of givenness itself. The appearance is the beginning, it's the absolute ground. That what he calls the phenomenon of radical givenness is its ontology itself. And so a couple real quick examples. In sickness, when somebody's sick, you can even get the name of the sickness, you can determine it, but it defines whatever the illness is going to be. It gives some general structure because it's been identified, it's got a concept, but it does not reduce the ambiguity of the affects, the proximal affects at all, so that you are still kind of unable to get distance from the actual unrepresented real of the illness. And then so he got all of this from the theology about the icon, where a deliberate symbolic failure is put into the icon in order to create a difference between intentional representation, so the representation of the sacred, plus what's unintended about its representation. So the icon, they have these flat faces, long noses, so that as your intention goes to the icon, the intention fails, you get unintentional intention, and then you wind up with that non-relation. It's the same non-relation in Lacan. And so I guess, and for him, the Catholic Eucharist is like the ultimate example of the radicality of this givenness, this ground of everything as gift, the gift of the appearance. So in the Catholic Eucharist, the icon is the host, it's a piece of bread. In the intention, when you look at the bread, in your intention, it's intentional, it's bread. But the subject of Annunciation, the priest in this case, creates unintentional intention by saying, "This is my body, the body of God." And then, so you have this you create the counter object of the real. And Marion actually has this long discourse about why, in Catholic theology, they present it either as transubstantiation or they present it as real presence. And for Marion, it's real presence. But the failure of the intention of the symbolization of the host to contain the divine, for Marion, pushes the intention back onto the congregation, so that the body of Christ stops being the piece of bread and becomes the congregation of other people around. So, all right, that's time.